Welcome to No Stage, Just a Chair. I'm Brian, and this is me trying to figure things out without pretending I already know how. If I sound foolish, that means it's working. If music sounds a little 80s, good. I was basically raised on scents and questionable hair choices. And if any of this sounds familiar, pull up a chair. So most of the time I start with a story, and this one is going to be a little bit different because I want to take a little bit of time to unpack a thought. I want to unpack this thought of helping. And I want to unpack this thought because here lately, I've sat down with some entrepreneurs, and in sitting down with some of the entrepreneurs, I've been taking notes for myself, and I've been writing down things for myself, and I've been trying to track behaviors for myself. And then listen back to them and see what I'm doing, see how I'm behaving, seeing how true I'm being to what I say that really matters. And I noticed something in myself, and I think it's a pattern that we all kind of fall into. And the pattern is this idea that helping feels responsible, but in the midst of that responsible feeling, there's this little part that feels off. And when I felt that thing feel off, I wanted to dig into it a little bit. And what I discovered about myself. Again, when we talk about these things, I don't want to paint this like this is everybody and this is what everybody does. Instead, I want to just present this as something that I noticed about myself. This is something that I noticed, and maybe I'm not the only one. But in helping, I noticed that some things felt off. And when I sat down and I listened to the recordings and the sessions that I was in, I noticed that sometimes my help drifted into a place that wasn't helpful. And here's what I mean. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to not step in. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is ask questions instead of give answers. Sometimes the most helpful thing that you can do is to let them wrestle with it for a moment, for a time. And what I want to do is I want to jump in. I want to fix it. And I think I want to fix it because I want to be helpful, but I'm actually teaching them to rely on me instead of giving a path forward. And that doesn't benefit anybody. And I'll be honest, over the years, I've had a lot of moments where when I'm working with people, I will be selfish. I will be maybe arrogant in saying this, but this is just me admitting out loud. Sometimes it's just easier to do it yourself. Sometimes it just takes too much time to teach them. Sometimes it takes too much time to teach them, and whenever you teach them, they're not going to do it right in the beginning anyway. So I would just rather not waste my time. Holy smokes, that's terrible. That's not the person I want to be. But doing it myself feels cleaner, feels safer, feels less risky and less messy. But who benefits from it? I don't know that anybody benefits. I don't benefit because I'm just teaching them to rely on me. And they don't benefit because they're just learning to rely on me. Instead of, I had a college professor. He was the dean of student life at my university. And he talked about, I sat down with him one day and he said, for generations, we've been teaching people what to think instead of how to think. And that may not sound like any big revelation, but in 1991, that was a pretty big revelation. And that was a mile marker conversation for me that I've looked at over the years and looking at it going, he introduced the idea of how to think into my process. And it was a mile marker for me because it was a growth and development and a realization of how that was valuable. And to put it back into personal terms, he could have just told me what to do, and that moment wouldn't have been as valuable. It wouldn't have been as altering. It wouldn't have been as changing. It would have just been another thing. But instead, he presented possibility. And in presenting possibility, he introduced change. He let me learn a new thing that he could have done for me, but it wouldn't have benefited me. Really grateful for that. And I would like to be that person because as a consultant, as a strategic advisor with a lot of the hats that I wear with companies, it would financially make the most sense for me to teach them to rely on me. That gives me the most job security. It benefits them the least. So is my job to protect my security, or is my job to be helpful? I want to keep leading into that place of helpfulness because that's the kind of person I want to be. That's the way that I want to think. That's the kind of partner that I want to be. That's the kind of consultant I want to be. That's the kind of behavior that I want to practice. But what I have to realize is that explaining takes time, clarifying direction takes patience, and sometimes waiting feels irresponsible when the stakes are real. But over the long arc of behavior, taking some of those short-term losses contributes to long-term gains. And if I want to play the long game as much as I say that I do, then that's where I need to lean. And part of where I landed in this is I was realizing in a conversation with a particular client, I realized that me over helping removed ownership from them. They removed ownership because they didn't need to have. I talk so much about purpose. I talk so much about values. I talk so much about all these things. And whenever I define it for them, whenever I become the hand on the till, when I become the person guiding the ship, then I've removed, there's this term talking about removing agency. I don't want to remove agency. I don't want to teach them to rely on me. I want them to begin to learn what it means to enable their values, what it means to define their values, what it means to live within their values, and for them to make those decisions for themselves. I don't want them to be reliant on my values or even my read on what their values are. I want them to be able to put their own hand on the till, put their own hand on the rudder, put their own hand to the oars, and be able to define the direction. Because at some point, overhelping becomes about control. Example. My 19-year-old this week went out to his car, tried to start the car. The car said, "There's not a key here." And I've decided that those electronic keys that we have, I hate them because I have an old Land Cruiser that I love. I love it deeply. You know what's really awesome about my old Land Cruiser that I love deeply? I walk up to the vehicle and here's this physical key, and I put it into this physical lock, and I turn it, and the door unlocks. It's magical. And now everybody has these cars. I have another good friend that he has a car that whenever he walks up to it, it automatically starts. And the air conditioner starts in the summer and the heater starts in the winter. And it's not even a button that he pushes. He walks up and it just does it. That's magical until it doesn't work anymore. I've had the same conversation with my son about using maps on his phone. Feel free to laugh at me and call me old. Feel free to say anything that you want. But one of the things that I told him is, if you always use maps to go everywhere that you go, if anything happens and it all goes away, can you find your way still? Does that make sense? We rely on this technology so much so that all of a sudden we become helpless without it. Think about that for a second. We've become helpless without it. I want him to be able to drive from the house to his work in Norman. I want him to know roughly where he is and where he's going and not just look at turn-by-turn directions. Because turn-by-turn directions won't always be there. For the normal rituals and routines in your life, I want you to have some sense of where it is that you're going and some sense of direction, and enough sense of direction that you can actually drive there on your own. My 16-year-old, whenever he gets behind the wheel of my car and we turn out of the neighborhood, I ask him where we're going. If we're driving downtown, it's like, "Hey, do you know where we turn to go downtown?" "Well, we turn on this road." Awesome. I ask those questions. I don't give him the answers for them. I ask them because I want him to feel confident in where he's going and what the direction is, what the point is, what the destination is. So I digress. So my 19-year-old, his key on his car is not working. So the car won't start. Can't unlock it. Don't know what's wrong. We changed the battery to see if the battery is the problem. Battery's not the problem. Something else is going on. Next thing you know, we've got to have his vehicle towed into the dealership. Dealership's looking at it, trying to figure out what it is. And I told him before he went to the dealership that it's his job to make the phone call. He's 19. Make the phone call. Well, I'm not sure what to say. What's going on with your vehicle? Tell him what's happening. Tell them that you've got a vehicle that's coming in on a tow truck. That's what they want to know. So he calls them. He tells them all the things. He did a great job, to be honest. Did a great job. Really unsure. I'm standing here listening. I'm standing here doing what I can, but he did a great job. Vehicle got there. I went with him when he went in to check on it. And as I was being there to support him, I started to notice that I started following up a little too much. Hey, have you texted them this? Hey, have you asked them this? Hey, have you done this? Hey, have you done this? I started turning into a pest. And I realized that I was doing it. So I just told him, hey, I'm going to stop bothering you so much because you're doing a good job. And in you doing a good job, I need to let you do a good job because you're taking ownership. And I didn't say you're taking ownership, but I'm realizing in the aftermath of it, in the thoughts about it, that what I was doing was I was taking control back from him. I wasn't letting him succeed. And it wasn't because I was trying to be a jerk. It's because I was overhelping. And in overhelping, I was making him helpless. I don't need to do that. So I told him, I'm going to take a step back. You're not in trouble. You actually did a great job. You haven't done anything wrong. You're actually doing a great job. But I'm going to start helping less because I'm doing a bad job. I'm doing a bad job of letting you grow into this responsibility. I'm doing a bad job of you feeling self-reliant. And to point back to the beginning of this conversation, I want to teach you how to think, not what to think. That's my goal. He was doing a good job. And my help was quietly telling him who was in charge. He's 19. It's time for him to have places in his life where he gets to be the boss. And this was a really great place for him to do that. Now, you may be sitting there wondering what in the world this has to do with work. What in the world this has to do with ideas. What in the world this has to do with kind of the point of this whole podcast. Let me unpack it really. I got 3 things that I want to touch on. As a leader, which the funny thing is I've noticed, feel free to laugh at me. I've realized how much parenting is leadership. There are things that I learn in conversations with clients that directly apply to the conversations I have with my children. And there are conversations I have with my children that directly apply to the conversation I have with business leaders and business owners and even audiences. And it's not because I'm being condescending to any one of them. It's because there are some pretty consistent themes that apply to all of them. Does that make sense? I'm not saying every business owner is a child that's learning to do things on his own. I'm saying that there are some principles that apply across the board. Here's one of those applications. Demonstration versus definition. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Most of my life, leadership looked like, I'll just do it. It's faster that way. They'll pick it up if they watch me enough times. Explaining takes too long. Sometimes that works. Demonstration can teach a skill. But sometimes I'm overhelping. I'm showing too much. Or I have to keep demonstrating because I haven't defined it very well. Does that make sense? I have to keep demonstrating because I haven't defined it very well. Defining it very well means I have to put it in enough words that they can start to take ownership of it. They have to understand it and internalize it enough they can start to find their process for it. Because I don't want to keep demonstrating and keep demonstrating and keep demonstrating. I want to define it clearly enough that they can start to find their process that takes care of it. Does that make sense? Because the truth is, the reason I was doing that, the reason I wasn't giving enough information to give them success is because I was being immature. It just was. I was being immature. Doing can teach skills. Defining teaches ownership. Lets them find their way. Second thing, questions before ideas. I love ideas. I love unpacking all those things. I love those ideas. But when I start with my ideas, then I teach them to be relying on me. When I start with questions and I give enough space for them to wrestle with it, then everybody wins. I've seen this pattern show up again and again and again and again. Ideas offered too early, help given before direction is named. Questions matter because questions lead to discovery. Make sense? That's where I want to lean. I want to lean into the thing that leads to discovery. Questions before ideas leads to discovery. I'll give you another example of this. I talked about with my assistant years ago, the direction that I gave to my assistant is bring me things to say no to. And that sounds really simplified, and it kind of is, but it set me up in a way that it gave her more ownership of the ideas. Her job wasn't to replicate me. Her job was to bring her point of view and her ideas that fit into the big context, because at the end of the day, it wasn't about what to think, it was about how to think. So in bringing me things to say no to, that was her learning how to think. Next thing, control versus ownership. Control versus ownership. Overhelping teaches control. Overhelping teaches control. Clarity transfers ownership to the person who must carry it. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean you stand on the edge of the pool and you toss your kid in and let them drown. It means that you define how this works. It means you communicate. It means you clarify. It means you set them up for success. And then at some point, you let them take ownership. You let them do it their way. Because I think at the end of the day, if I let myself, I could convince myself that all my ideas are the right ideas and that everybody is crazy to not do it the way that I think they should do it. And that is the worst kind of narcissism. That's the worst kind of silliness. But instead, I have to trust that honestly, that maybe my idea isn't the best idea. Maybe my idea is to teach them to rely on me instead of teaching them to think for themselves and take ownership. I don't need to control it. Leadership isn't control. Leadership is guiding them to the place that they can take ownership of their duties, of their responsibilities. And we have to recognize the places that we do that. Because when we do that, it's trust made visible through definition. You feel that? It's trust made visible through definition. It's me saying to my son, my 19-year-old, I didn't just remove my support. I told him, hey, I've been overhelping. And I'm telling you now that I'm going to pull back a little bit because you're actually doing a great job. You are doing a great job on your own. I'm going to pull back a little bit and let you own it. That was me trusting him. He needed to see that. He needed to feel that. He needed to feel that victory. And he is better set up to take care of this in the future. Does that make sense? So the point of what I'm talking about here isn't don't help. The point of what I'm talking about here is, why am I helping? How am I helping? Am I setting them up to rely on me or to take ownership for themselves? Because helping feels like care. I can convince myself that I'm being helpful. But back to my original idea, but clarity teaches freedom. It creates freedom. If you want people to grow, you have to let the work belong to them. Because sometimes the most generous thing you can do is to help less. And I'm not going to pretend like that's easy. Like I'm wrestling with it. And the truth is, I've felt distracted for about half of this episode because I'm thinking of all the places that I am an absolute control freak, where I overthink everything. And I'm thinking about all the places that I need to apply this for myself. So ask yourself. For me, ask myself. Here's 4 questions that I want to leave you with. Where am I helping because direction hasn't been named? Number 2, what am I doing that should be defined instead? What am I doing that should be defined instead? Number 3, who might be losing ownership because I keep stepping in? And number 4, what would change if I clarified roles before offering help? Those are 4 questions to ask. There are 4 questions that I need to ask. Because in order for me to grow into the next chapter of what it is that I hope for, I've got to lean into this. And if I'm being honest, and hopefully I'm trying to be honest in all these conversations, I'm intending to be honest. My intention is there. My effort is there. And I said this off camera before, actually, after one of the previous episodes. Today is a day that I'm recording 4 episodes. Once a month, I sit down and I create these episodes. I write them out. I map out kind of the thoughts and the things that I'm wrestling with, the things I'm struggling through. And this is episode number 23. 23 episodes in, I've landed in this place of episode 21 and 22 are things that I'm honestly struggling with. I'm honestly struggling to do them. And I almost feel like, not almost, I feel like I'm incapable of teaching them because I feel deeply how much I'm wrestling with them right now. I know how much I feel this tension of trying to land on what it is it's not the tension of landing on what it is that I really feel about them, but it's trying to follow through on these ideas so that they line up. Does that make sense? How do I land in a place that these ideas start to line up? What it is that I'm proposing, what it is that I'm promoting, what it is that I'm discussing, what it is that I'm laying out as thoughts. Am I actually following through on them? Because I'm struggling to do it. I've not arrived. And the thing that I'm trusting in is that why I say I'm here is why I'm here. The thing that I'm trying to say at the end of the thing that I'm saying at the end of every episode, this is where I say it messy. Do I mean that? If I mean it, then maybe I have to admit out loud the things I'm struggling in. And maybe there's some feedback that I'm going to get from you guys as to your victories and your struggles. Maybe there's some recognition that starts to happen and me admitting out loud the areas where I'm struggling. Because even with my 19-year-old, I'm trying to figure out how to be a dad that grows him into being a self-reliant man. How is it that I can give them enough ownership of their own lives that they feel responsible? They feel the weight of their choices and they can live inside of the knowledge that they matter. And I want to do it right. I want to do it well because I want to see their success. I want to see them thrive. I want to see them be better people and better dads and better humans. I want to see companies that far exceed anything that I ever hoped for with them. I want to see them succeed because of the way of thinking, how to think. I want to see them succeed. And I'm seeing that, but in order for that to really flesh itself out, I've got to figure out how much help is the right help. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I would love to hear what that means, because this is the place where I say it messy before anybody would assume that it was tidy all along. And I'll see you next week.